The investigation into the Long Island serial killer began as a search for a missing woman named Shannon Gilbert. The 23-year-old disappeared near Gilgo Beach back in 2010. When investigators started their search, instead of finding Shannon, they came across body after body on a strip of beach on Long Island. It began with the Gilgo 4, and then more victims, eventually totaling 10, until Shannon's remains were finally found on another beach nearby. Then, 13 years later, an arrest in the case. An architect, police say, was seemingly hiding in plain sight, named Rex Heuermann. Heuermann is accused of murdering 3 of the Gilgo 4 victims. And the question remains, is Heuermann possibly connected to Shannon Gilbert or any of the other victims? Tonight, we're diving into the latest updates and speaking with the attorney representing Shannon's family and the lawyers who are representing the accused serial killer's wife and kids. Good evening to you and welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Julie Grand, just helping out this week, filling in for Vinny while he is off. We begin this hour in Long Island, New York, where a seemingly average architect and father named Rex Heuermann was arrested on July 13th and charged with the murders of Megan Waterman, Melissa Barthelemy, and Amber Lynn Costello. He's also the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Now, after his arrest, Heuermann's Massapequa Park home was searched for days. Authorities found and recovered close to 300 weapons from his house. And the Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney spoke about that in a press conference at the conclusion of the search.
No guns were returned to the home. To my knowledge, we all of the guns that were recovered, and we're talking about 283, about approximately 279 weapons were recovered. They're being categorized. Some may not some may not be complete weapons. Some may not be able to be defined as a weapon under New York State law. But suffice to say, there was quite a few weapons found in the house.
Now, we're learning now that 41 of those 280 firearms were not registered. And according to Crime Online, a New York judge has ruled that the firearms seized from the home can now be transferred to Nassau County, where authorities could be filing some gun charges against Rex Heuermann as well. Newsday reporting that the transfer can occur after a 30-day waiting period. And during that time, defense attorneys can examine, test, and photograph those firearms. We got a great panel joining us tonight to talk all about everything in this case. In Los Angeles, senior reporter for DailyMail.com, Caitlin Becker. In New York, the attorney representing the family of Shannon Gilbert, John Ray. Also in New York, psychologist, researcher, and expert on violent crime, and the author of the book, The New Evil, Dr. Gary Bricado. Wonderful to have you all here tonight. Thank you for being here. John Ray, let me start with you. You have been an advocate for Shannon Gilbert and other victims at Gilgo Beach for a long, long time. What's the latest as you have a parallel private investigation going on while the task force is undergoing their investigation?
Well, the investigation continues with respect to the people I represent, but and the families of the victims. But as to Heuermann himself, people are calling me. Floods of information is coming into my office. I'm not doing any active, pounding of the pavement to investigate him. People are offering this evidence to me. Now, since the time that I generated 4 witnesses, 2 of whom gave affidavits as to Heuermann, this was back in September, August, September, period of time into October. And since the press conference on October 18th that I held with the police commissioner, Rodney Harrison, more evidence has come in, more affidavits have been produced, and they keep coming. So
Right.
there are new developments.
Right. Well, in one pertaining to Rodney Harrison, John, so he is the Suffolk County Police Commissioner, but announced his resignation sometime after that press conference that you both held together. And I remember the DA speaking out, saying that anything official on this is going to come from his office and the task force. It seemed like the police commissioner and the district attorney were not on the same page. Any ideas why Rodney Harrison is resigning?
Yeah, I'd spoken to Rodney before he resigned and had several good conversations with him, and I don't think his resignation has anything to do with the method of his investigations. Instead, he has a very fine family with a daughter who's a superstar at Wake Forest in basketball and is going on perhaps to the pros. He wants to spend time with them, and it was clear that whoever won the election or would win the election to county executive would be appointing their own new commissioner. So it was a very genteel and proper way for the commissioner, for Rodney, to bow out and stay on until a new person is appointed.
Mm-hmm. And John, I'm simplifying and paraphrasing just for the sake of time here for our discussion, but to back up, if anybody missed your news conference, you were making the announcement that you've found some connections, your team of private investigators say, with Shannon Gilbert and Rex Heuermann, right?
Yes, there was a witness who came forward, a taxi cab driver, who has given an affidavit in detail that she encountered Shannon Gilbert and Rex Heuermann in a motel. She picked up Shannon from the motel after Heuermann had run out of the motel. And she interviewed Shannon at length, recognized her, and knew she had that encounter. And then a few days later, Heuermann, or might even been a few weeks later, Heuermann appeared in a threatening manner to her, to the taxi driver, with a gun and in his hand, the handgun, and made very life-threatening comments to her and scared the daylights out of her. And then she got away. But so this person has no axe to grind, no skin in the game, no need for fame, doesn't want her name revealed, not looking to write a book or anything of that sort. So she comes, not only well vetted by me for many hours before she signed the affidavit, but also by Commissioner Harrison himself. We met with her in a room in New York and talked for probably close to 2 hours.
And I would imagine that affidavit has been turned over to the task force.
Not only was it turned over, but at the press conference you heard between myself and Commissioner Harrison, it was presented to the press, and I explained in detail what it said, and the commissioner was there, and he was giving his tacit approval.
Appreciate it, John. We have a clip from that press conference. Let's listen to a little bit of what the commissioner shared.
People don't understand, when I first came into this position, I sat down with John Ray, myself and the members of the task force, to have that conversation about information that he may have, and let's make sure we're putting a dragnet out there regarding any information that's coming to us. That's why I'm going to continue my partnership with John. And if people have a reluctancy to come forward to law enforcement and they want to go to John Ray, then it's important that we take this information and then we follow forward with furthering the investigation. So it's still an ongoing investigation, so I'll leave it at that. Well, once again, is this: we have the information, we're working it, and we'll see where it leads us down the road.
Yeah, it seems like everyone is going to miss the commissioner on this investigation. Certainly it seemed like when he was involved, things were really happening. Caitlin Becker, I want to go to you next, please. For the public sentiment, you've really got your finger on the pulse of this. You have since the outset, and it seemed that it was so hot and there was so much discussion in July, and we've all been kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop, especially with Maureen Brainerd Barnes. But we haven't heard a thing. Your thoughts, please.
I'm surprised we haven't gotten those additional charges for murder against Rex Heuermann for Maureen Brainerd Barnes, who was the fourth victim in the Gilgo Beach 4. It is pretty shocking that that hasn't happened, particularly because police have said both in court documents and in press conferences that the investigation into Brainerd Barnes's murder was ongoing and that they had at one point anticipated new or more additional charges to be forthcoming. So the fact that that hasn't happened yet is a little surprising. That being said, from what I understand, the state that Maureen Brainerd Barnes's body was in when they found it was the most degraded of all of them. So I think it's a lot harder to get any sort of substantial bits of physical evidence off of that at that point, which may be what's holding people up. But from a public sentiment, I think the biggest issue and question that people are having is Rex Heuermann connected to the multiple other bodies that have been found along Gilgo Beach and along this stretch of beachland in Long Island? It goes beyond those 4 initial victims. There were several others, I think maybe a total of approximately 11 that have been found there. So there are a lot of questions as to whether or not investigators are going to be able to connect Rex Heuermann to these additional bodies.
You're absolutely right, Caitlin. Absolutely right. And who knows if those firearms seized will provide any clues. We know that we saw some photographs of that lengthy search of the Heuermann home in Massapequa Park after his arrest. Some of the items seized, just some of them, 280 firearms to be exact, 41 of those guns unregistered, 26 of them were handguns, 15 were assault weapons. They also seized 10 illegal high-capacity magazines, ammunition, gunpowder, and some survivalist gear. All right, and depending on who you ask, that may or may not be a lot of guns. I've talked to people, who feel both ways about this issue. Some people are gun collectors, no big deal. But if you're suspected of being a serial killer, yeah, it is a big deal, isn't it? Dr. Gary Bricado, let me go to you next. How do the guns fit in with the serial killer profile that police are saying is at play here with Rex Heuermann?
Well, it's a little complicated because Heuermann was a collector of guns, and it's entirely possible that the collecting provided a cover for amassing an arsenal that would have been used as part of a playing out of a fantasy that would be necessary for psychosexual fulfillment in a sexually sadistic serial killer, if that is in fact what it turns out Heuermann is. If he is the offender who is responsible for these deaths, then what we have to understand is that he falls under the umbrella of a sexually sadistic serial killer, and those people have a tendency to begin in their 20s and to persistently commit those offenses over time. And this is someone who's 59. So that we'd have to picture a person over and over again going out and honing a process, playing out a process that is based completely on fantasy. And when we see there is a large arsenal of guns, we have to think, how do those guns figure into that particular fantasy? So you start imagining a person who's either using them as a control mechanism to get someone to a place where they can play out their particular fantasies, or they might have been used for the purpose of hunting a victim. For example, there have been serial killers that had large arsenals of guns that did things like have people run through the forest while running after them, or using them in other ways to play out these vile kind of fantasies. It is interesting to take that piece of information and link it with John Ray's point that he's made previously on your show about there being some references made in the cab to wanting to go out to the forest with a victim and, quote, take a long walk. And we don't know if Rex, who was a hunter, was interested in hunting only animals, or perhaps might have played out some fantasies of running after women.
Hunting people, perhaps. It's really sinister and sickening what is being alleged here, as you know, Dr. Gary.